All right, I think Bretta won't be here for a little bit, so we can probably start at the top of the hour. I know this first one was your thing, John. Do you want to intro this?
Yeah, sure. Um, so I have been kind of trying to chip away at the backlog of unit tests for the various functions side of Ceph ADM. And as I've kind of gone along, I've been avoiding certain functions, especially the command functions, because it's a lot of mocking. Now, I'm not going to suggest that we avoid all of them, but I'm starting to wonder if there is a lot of value in getting coverage, unit test coverage for those when we have integration test coverage with Toothology, and it's a big exercise in writing a lot of mocks. So I think it's a lot of value to try to cover some of the simpler, lower level functions with unit tests. But these higher level ones, the command functions, I'm not as convinced now as when we made the list that there's a lot of value in doing those. So looking for feedback.
I mean, like these sort of ones here.
Yeah. Now, again, we should probably look at them at least once before we take them off the list. But I'm suggesting that if you look at it and say this is not worth covering, maybe just put a comment saying, not going to cover, and then in the code doing a pragma no cover for now, because we can always remove the no cover in the code later. That way, when we run the coverage report after running the tests, we know what we've not got to versus what we explicitly decided not to do for now.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'd have to go through some of these. Like I know some of these are like super short and just call one other function anyway.
Right.
Like I think like command ls is one of those.
Yeah, I think when we spoke yesterday, I said something like, if the function is like twiddling repo files, that might be one we can cover because all it's doing is like writing files to a directory. But some of these other ones that are just like, I'm going to call 800 container commands, it just becomes an exercise in mocking everything. And what does that prove?
Yeah, some of them are tough. Like I know even like the underlying function of command ls is a lot of oddman commands.
Right.
Yeah,
So if we use that one as an example, we would basically say like we did with the putting our name next to it, like I put my name next to it and say, decided not to cover it.
Yeah, like that's one we probably just want to have done via integration tests. They're just too hard. They're not useful, I guess, to do unit tests on.
Yeah, it's not just a difficulty thing. If it was a difficult but provided a lot of value, I'd probably be more for it. But I think it's, again, you usually get to a certain point where all you're doing is writing mocks and it doesn't prove much.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, we can mark some of them like that as we go through them. Say like, I don't think this is like one that we should do. And I guess we should try to see when we do that if there is integration tests for them or that involve them in some way. Just to make sure they're still tested. Like say like I could bring up this ls one because I happen to know that one. Like that one because we use the ls command to get the daemons on the host like at all times. Like that one's constantly being used. Like you can be pretty confident that one generally works. Maybe there's some specific case that could be broken, but generally it should work. Whereas some of these other ones I don't know who we use as much, so we might have to maybe introduce integration tests later if
Okay, good point.
Do that. But at least, yeah, I think at least because this document is really just for checking the unit tests. That's the point of it. So I think we should still just mark it as you said. So like we're not going to write unit tests for this one. Let me go through later and check for the integration tests. But as far as the process of getting the unit test done before we pick up this file, we can just say we're not going to do it. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I guess it's just a matter of going through each one, obviously offline, not here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the other thing is there's definitely stuff in this list that's not, sorry, there's definitely things in the file that are not in this list. I was just working on call, and call is not in this list for whatever reason. Um, so I should add it to the end of the list. But
This
yeah,
was kind of
as
ad hoc. I don't think this was
if
like
you're looking at
auto-generated.
yeah, if you're just looking at it and go, oh, I want to write some coverage for X Y Z, and it's not in the list. Yeah,
Yeah,
please
definitely we could do
please
that.
feel free to add it.
Are you also using these arrows to say it's done? Is that what that means?
Yeah, that the arrows is just the same as the line above. I did them all together because I kind of
Oh, like a
conceptually
merge.
saw them as related. Yeah.
I know like this one for I know I did do finish this one, but I never marked it as being done.
Yeah, I don't worry. I don't think check units for instance. I didn't put a PR number, and I didn't. I got lazy and didn't finish remarking on that.
Yeah, maybe something like this where we just say like merged, or you can use your arrows
Yeah,
like this to say also
yeah,
merged. You shouldn't be doing them on a row
yeah.
here. All right, that all makes sense. I think everything you said is accurate. Yeah, all that stuff.
Okay, that was an easy one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's going to be a lot of pushback on we not do unit tests or tests or for functions where it's not
Yeah,
useful to do unit tests. Let me go back
yeah. And
to
like I said, if you look at it and go, oh, this is not bad. It's not a low value. Not just mocking exercise.
yeah, I guess yeah. But at least we'll try to do the ones that at least everyone or that people don't think needs to be skipped first, and then at the end we
Yeah,
can look at the coverage and stuff and say like, all right, this is what we have
I
left.
agree.
This is what we skipped. But now I know. I guess the first thing is we still have to get through all the ones that don't need to be skipped. But it'll be a lot easier to make some decisions on what to do at the end once
Yeah,
the other ones
my
are.
issue is I run the coverage report, and I like scroll up and down the file looking for one that is both mostly uncovered and um, doesn't look like it's a giant spider web into all sorts of other things.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of that because tool is meant for interacting with the host system and stuff. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, we can keep finding a handful of things that are good to test. That we'll eventually get to the end of this. Um, we can go back at the end and see like, all right, things we skipped, maybe revisit them just to make sure once over that
Yeah.
they should be skipped. And
The real tough ones I don't want to touch are ones that are like 90% covered, and then there's like an if block, and I'm like, I don't know who is covering this function or why. It's like, I'm going to avoid that for now.
yeah, man, that's stuff we can get to at the end. That's like the details once we have most of the coverage done.
Yeah. Well, I guess a part of it is some of the functions get tested implicitly or covered implicitly by other things, so it's a little hard to say, oh, this has got unit test coverage when it's being kind of accidentally covered. But
That's true.
that's life.
All right. Yeah, I don't think there's gonna be any pushback on that. I think we're all gonna sort of agree. You know, we can definitely mark things as being skippable. If they call making a few too many calls to things we have to mock.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what you might see is as I go, I might just put more lines in this file where, like, for myself, I don't want to touch it as
Yeah, something like marking it as
spider
skipped.
webby.
Like we were marking it as merged up here, we can just mark it as skipped.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, that all sounds good.
Okay.
All right, let me.
So I think as we do that, we ought to like maybe go through and check off like where the functional tests or where the integration tests exist. Like, is it in the run unit or
Yeah.
somewhere else? Because some of these like revoke SSH key, I'm not sure where we have coverage for things like that.
Good point.
We probably ought to confirm that that's explicitly tested somewhere, and the output that's expected by the manager is the same.
Yeah. Is there any way the coverage report to do that, or is that too hard?
So the coverage report that's generated by the unit tests is just generated by unit tests. So if you really, really want to, like, we could mess around with the whole infrastructure, and you can get a regular Python program to generate coverage, but it's a big pain in my opinion. it might be an investment for the future, but it's not a small task, in my opinion.
Okay. I was just asking if like the coverage word stuff that already exists, there are some ways to like say like tell me which function or which test did this one. So we can
Now,
see.
you basically would have to enable like the Ceph ADM that gets run in the Toothology nodes to generate coverage in like a directory somewhere, and then run a coverage report on that afterward. And like I said, it's doable. You can like PyTest is invoking the coverage module, but the coverage module can be used on its own. It's just yeah, it's an infrastructure job.
Okay. And maybe in the future, once we have if we have like a lot of stuff done, then maybe we can go look at that. So I think we still have clearly like a bunch of things that we know need to be tested and aren't tested at all, and they don't even have any coverage.
Right.
Once we have more stuff, we're closer to the end, we can revisit that and see if we can figure out where some of these things are covered. In case they're not on this list and we don't know where they came from.
Yeah. Yeah. So it might be interesting if we had like an intermediate state. Like I looked at it and it looks difficult, but I haven't checked if there's pathology coverage yet. So you don't have to do every step altogether.
Yeah, for now
we can
we'll
put
start
whatever
with
we want on the line. Oops, sorry.
like for now we worry about like the skipping and stuff, and I think like things that are marked like that, things that we didn't explicitly test as part of this, we can go back at those ones at the end. We at least know that the ones that are on this list that getting marked as tested, we know where they came from and stuff. So there's an explicit test for them. It's just everything else we have to worry about after. Yeah, we can figure this out later.
Yeah.
I think as far as the topic today, skipping stuff, I think there is no problem with that part at least.
I think what I'll try to do is as I look at things, I'll try to write more free-form commentary on them. Back and look at the list afterward. It'll be like, oh, he thought this one was challenging. I will then go look to see if there's a Toothology test for this.
Yeah. Or at least it's something either Toothology explicitly for it, or it's something that is so common that like we know it's getting tested.
Yeah.
Like command deploy, I think
like
might be hard, but everywhere.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Let me put something in the notes for this. So. I think those were the main things.
Yeah.
Right about.
Yeah. Works for me.
Do you want to go on to the call function stuff?
Yeah, I'll try to be a little faster with this because it's more like we've got two sets of patches. They both build on top of an existing PR that I have where I wrote tests for the call function. While I was writing test coverage for the call function, I noticed that the timeout parameter just doesn't work. You can tell it to timeout after 5 seconds, and the thing will just sit there happily for 60 seconds waiting for the process to exit. Took a detour into learning a little bit more about async IO because I really never used it in Anger before. So these two patches, these two series are alternative versions of the same fix. One of them adds an additional feature. The first one is the smallest possible fix. It's probably the most efficient as well. The second one adds a feature that I thought might be nice to have, which is the ability to capture the logging of a command that we do timeout on. But seeing as how the code doesn't do that today, it's entirely optional. So I was wondering if people thought it was valuable enough to add, or we should probably maybe just stick with the simpler version.
So to clarify, this is the more complicated one that has the modified T
Yes.
function, and then the
Yeah,
other one.
The simpler version gets rid of the T function entirely and uses a built-in function from the standard library called communicate.
Yeah.
And it is, for what it's worth, in the comment of the second commit message on the second branch, I do note that the T option is slower by about 2 seconds on the slowest running test. So it's not the worst thing in the world if we really like the feature, but it is there is also a performance difference, which I felt like pointing out.
I remember like long time ago trying to fix something in that function. To be honest, I don't remember the details, but like it seemed to work at that time. But then we ran in the back in very dense cluster. You remember, Adam?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I ended up linking John the exact tracker for that. I don't have it on hand now,
Okay.
but he saw that. I think what we ended up figuring out is that that was happening when the thing should
That
have
was
timed
the
out.
ordering arguments thing
Yeah, where
with
he
the lines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
took
could be.
he swapped these two lines, like these two here. They were
Yeah.
you moved the others because it made sense. Like, oh, we'll wait for the process and then we'll gather because the wait for wasn't doing anything because you figured out this as
Yeah,
well. Like,
Yeah, the issue is await really says block on this and don't move forward until they're all done. So what we really need to do is process the standard out and standard error while waiting for the thing to exit. I had an intermediate version that I'm not showing here because this is simpler, where T continued to exist, and it basically said gather TT wait for. And if you do that, it all actually does work. But then I further simplified the patch to use communicate.
yeah. Whatever change you introduce, just it would be good to make sure that works for very, very long outputs, because
Yes.
that's the case when we
So,
have very dense.
Adam,
Yeah.
right, so can you scroll to this very long? Yeah, it's right there, 623. So I don't know if this number is insufficient. We can certainly bump it up some more, but this thing tries to write whatever, 100,000 line. I can't count zeros on Adam's screen,
a million.
but okay, thanks. So it tries to generate that many lines of output in a simplistic way. And that test is the one that takes like
Good.
either 3 or 6-ish seconds. And hopefully that's sufficient. I don't know. So if you have a case where a command is generating more output than that,
I remember in that cluster, in the dense cluster, if my memory is good, the line was 160 something kilobyte.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think that was that before we moved to JSON Pretty for the Ceph volume output? Was that when it was just one big line as well? I know there's one thing we had to do is we had to shift the Ceph volume output at one point to be JSON Pretty instead of just JSON because the single line was too big. But that was a separate thing that's already been fixed elsewhere. And then I don't, we've never fully figured out what was causing that issue Redo was talking about. It could have either been something with the thing timing out, but the fact that the the wait for thing was before the gather meant that when it timed out, it never I don't
Right.
know, fully returned. Or it could have been something with there being too much output. We don't actually know which one it was, the timeout or the output that was causing the problem.
So in the case of line breaks, communicate does not care. It basically accumulates bytes and returns a giant string, or actually returns a big bytes at the end, and we have to convert it to a string. If we kept the T function, then yeah, maybe the buffer could fill up, waiting for a long line. But if you've already resolved it, I don't think these patches change any of that.
Yeah, I think that problem should be gone. I think the
What I
issue we were running
can
into was either timeout or just too much output overall. Like it was just too big.
Yeah.
what I
And it's
can do
been,
and before filing the PR, what I can do is I can take the long running test and bump it up to even more, let it run for whatever 30 minutes, or I don't want a unit test that runs more than like this one already feels slow when you run the test. You're like, oh, what's going on? Oh yeah, it's the 5-second test. I don't really want to increase it beyond this, but I could do it by hand and say, oh, by the way, I bumped it up to, you know, a million or whatever it is. I don't know.
yeah.
N bytes and see if it chokes on that and just do it by hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would
Would
expect
that
it to
be
just-
sufficient?
Yeah, that's probably as good as we're going to get with testing with unit tests.
All right.
So I think so.
I think 1 million
So
is
just to,
really big value. As far as I remember, like in this very dense clusters was 160 kilobytes, so 1 million should be.
I'm going to write it down and try that. 160 KB.
Yeah. And it's
Okay.
a very good thing to see that you are adding unit test for that part because it wasn't covered. So
Right, because that was one of the first things Adam warned me about when I mentioned that I found that call had
yeah.
timeout wasn't working. So if you don't mind, I just want to rewind a little bit to the main question I have, which is, would the group prefer that we add a feature of being able to partially log timed out commands, or do we prefer the more simple, possibly better performing option? Because again, we don't have this feature, but I kind of went ahead and implemented it anyway because I wanted to. But I'm leaning towards not doing that now. But I wanted to give everyone the opportunity to chime in and say, "Oh, actually, we really want to know why a command might have hung, so we want that logging."
I'm leaning towards just using communicate.
Yeah.
I was thinking that even with the things that we normally run that were hanging, they log some things eventually that could maybe give some information. Like particularly I'm thinking about like Ceph volume stuff, but I don't know if that doesn't even show up as output. I think I don't think that ever ended up in any of this stuff that T was doing before. So I don't know how much we'd actually get, and this on top of being faster is also probably a bit safer. We're using a proper library thing. Somebody who knows what they're doing with this. As well, I'm sure T works okay, but I mean, it is still something we're sort of doing ourselves and trying to make sure it works and all that.
Yeah, that's generally my feeling now as well, and we can always come back and add locking back in later if we decide we do need that.
Yeah, but as you said, we already removed it because it did exist at one point. I ended up removing it and didn't even notice at the time that was happening because I don't think it ever actually did too much. Because there weren't a lot of situations where the command would even hang, and then when it does, I think most of those things weren't really outputting until the end, so we didn't get much out of it. So I would say it's probably not worth it for now, unless we find a specific use case, or we find an easier way to do it, I guess.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add, and this doesn't matter whichever version, is that when we try to time out the process and we kill it and then we wait for it, if the process is in D state or something, we still get stuck here. There's not much we can do about that at this time, like massively rewriting call, which I don't think we want to do. But I just figured I'd mention that because it came up in the discussion yesterday as well.
Yeah. I mean, eventually we do kind of want to do that because I think the end goal is to, whenever something, for whatever reason, fails, like it hangs or something, we want to be able to raise a health warning in the manager, which would require coming out of this command eventually, because the manager is just waiting for this to finish. We would have to implement some sort of timeout there as well, like at the manager, and have that call somehow timeout and not get stuck on this. Or we'd have to have this be able to return at some point without being able to kill the process.
Is there a tracker for that? I didn't ask this yesterday, but I'm wondering if we have it for the health warning aspect of it.
I think there's one generally for that. It's assigned to me, I think. Let me go check real quick if I can find it.
Okay, because maybe stick that in the doc, and I can refer back to it later. Again, I kind of lean towards doing the simpler thing now, but if it's a real desire to have, we can. I think the easiest thing might be to pass some sort of callback to call and say, if you time out, do this. That might be the simplest alternative. Yeah, so anyway, sorry, I have a tendency to go off on tangents. The main point of this meeting is just gathering feedback on that approach 1 versus approach 2. So if anyone has any strong opinions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll probably go with approach 1.
The approach 1, it's the one using communicate, right?
Yes.
This is 1 on the screen.
Yeah. Whenever we use standard array, I think that's better.
I would vote for 1.
All right. That is what I'll go with then. So I'll follow up my existing PR with another PR that actually fixes the function, and I'll delete the speculative test what's in the middle of Adam's screen right now.
Okay, so was this one actually just testing the logging in the middle of a function that hangs?
Yes, okay. Exactly.
That's why it's commented out. Yeah, we can just remove that for now. If we want it later, we can go for it. But I don't actually think we're going to have too much use case for that.
Right. That's fine. That's great.
Here.
Okay, and then the last one, and hopefully I can stop talking and stop wasting everyone's time, is while I was looking at the async IO docs, I noticed that there is a newer, I think it's called a handler, I forget, watcher. So newer kernels have a concept called PIDFDs, and the Python docs even call it a Goldilocks child watcher, as in sort of the ideal one. It's only supported on newer kernels. I checked this morning and I proved to myself that the RHEL or CentOS 8 kernel does not support this, but I do believe 9 does, which is not tested, and Fedora definitely does. So it might be nice to have something that optionally enable this. So do like a probe of the kernel version and that is what I link to in the gist, my hacky script to show how we might enable that alternative watcher for newer kernels and newer.
Is that what
Um,
the Git?
It's only available for Python 3.9, right?
Yeah, so basically I first check to see if the kernel is new enough, and then, oh, I already see a mistake, but that's okay. This is just a hack or a demo. So basically it looks to see if the kernel version is new enough, and if it is, it tries to use it, and if that name doesn't exist, the attribute error, we just use whatever the default is.
Okay.
I'm not saying I would do it this way in actual proper Ceph ADM, but this is like a partial cut and paste of the pieces of ADM I needed to prove to myself that it was A, workable, and B, we could conditionally do it. I was actually hoping that when we instantiated PidFD Child Watcher, it would raise a specific exception itself, like your kernel version is too old, which unfortunately it didn't do. So I did the uname checking stuff.
What did
And if there's a simpler way to do that, let me know. I just hacked that together and like to.
Platform thing? I mean, I don't know of any other way to check this platform module. Looks like it works fine. If this check actually works and it detected that the CentOS 8 or the RHEL 8 one was too old, then
what I did is I ran this script on my laptop, which is Fedora 36 or 7, doesn't really matter. And then I also ran it on a CentOS 8 VM, and I ran it on the base version of Python. And then I ran a Fedora 37 container on that version of CentOS, so that we're basically using the latest Python and an old kernel. And that was successfully used the native async run, but skipped using the PidFD watcher because it successfully detected that was on an old kernel. I hope that all made sense.
Okay. And in this case, are you importing this from somewhere, or are you just using Python 3.9? So just doing things. I know for this threaded child watcher, which I saw.
Right. So if I run this script on the Python version that comes with CentOS 8, I see the print using fallback async run because it's whatever Python 3.8, I think. And then if I run it in the Fedora 37 container, it runs line 37 and goes, "Oh, your kernel's too old. I'm not going to execute the if block." And then when I run it on my desktop, it is able to print enabled async IO PidFD child watcher.
Okay. Outside of the kernel version, right? Because I know for the threaded child watcher we have right now, we just have that code copied in to the binary.
Right.
It's not like actually importing it because it's on Python.
Well, I think it tries. I think it tries to do it, and then otherwise falls back to the copy and pasted version.
Because this one's on 3.9, we're gonna have to probably do the similar thing. To copy whatever it is in there.
Yes, so that's the sys version info check, which is checking the version of Python. I personally like to try and import things first, rather than use explicit version checks. But whatever. What am I trying to say? The kernel is different from the Python version, so the kernel version, I don't see another way to do that right now. The Python version, I opted for a try except rather than a is my version X. I hope that all makes sense.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I prefer it that way as well, where we just do a try except on the thing. If we have, because we actually can do that, it can work there. Not like the Podman or the kernel version where we have no nice way of doing a try catch. So I like that.
Anyway, I'm not going to rush to do this, but while it's fresh in my mind, it might be nice to add.
Yeah. So we'll probably have to copy in this PidFD child watcher, then do something like this, and just have that take the place of threaded child watcher. Is what it sounds like.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't planning on doing the copy and paste thing. I was basically going to say if the version of Python is new enough and the version of the kernel is new enough, use the built-in one. So
We're gonna
threaded
stick to
actually
one.
fixes some bugs where this is just a purely efficiency thing. The threaded child watcher has to create threads to watch the child. The PIT-FD basically creates a special FD to monitor the state of the child and sticks it in the epoll/select/whatever underlying thing the async IO loop is using.
Okay, so you're saying we'll just use the threaded child watcher unless all the conditions are met, and we can just import it properly. Not gonna.
That was my plan, yes.
That works as well. But I imagine a
Okay.
lot of the ones that have the kernel version are going to have the Python.
That's what I was thinking.
I'm not sure. Well, actually, I guess the only problem is inside of our containers. They're still built on CentOS 8. And they probably will be for a while, but I imagine that's still going to be an issue, or we won't be able to use this anyway. We have to wait until I guess they start building the containers using and.
Yeah, so I guess it depends on whether you're running Ceph ADM outside the container or inside the container. So since I guess it runs in both modes, it's like it can. Again, it's more of a small optimization rather than a, oh my god, we need this to fix a bug.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was for me just thinking like the manager module because this is running on the host. Actually, most of the time, I think it's the host one. There's only a handful of times I think there's ever run the. Yeah, they're using relatively new OS, and they could get some use out of this.
And
so
I
it's probably
don't
going to
know.
match up a little bit with the kernels in the Python version. So if we just do the checks, I think you're right. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not totally on top of what Red Hat downstream or RHCS downstream is doing, but I thought things are moving towards 9, and at some point I'm sure SUSE will do something similar with their enterprise stuff. So
yeah.
Eventually we'll have kernels that are newer or more widespread.
Yeah, I haven't tried the RHEL versions, but even just for upstream, I think a lot of people are going to be on some newer kernels. Some of the newer Ubuntu version or releases will have kernels high enough as well, so they can get some use out of this maybe.
So ultimately, it's a little bit of memory savings. I think it's a nice to have, but if I don't do it soon-ish, then we'll all forget about it, and it won't be until like 4 years, and someone will be like, "Why did you never switch to PIT-FD ChildWatch?"
Can you make like a cleanup tracker or something?
Yes, sounds good. All right, I will stop talking now. Thank you for everyone listening to my nonsense.
Right now we're using this threaded child watcher. I'm reading the code. Imagine that is something that point switch it to because we had some bugs related with that, right?
Bugs with what thing?
The threaded, the set child watcher, because I'm reading the binary code and I see that we are using like a special class.
That class is literally just a copy of the actual one, just because we were supporting an older Python version.
Mhm.
3.8.
Okay, we only did that for older Python versions, minor than 3.8.
So yeah, if you're using 3.8 or higher, then there's actually no benefit to that class. I think. I don't know if it even tries to import though. I don't know if it just always uses it because it assumes that there's a risk it could not be there. But it should be the literal class from the.
Mhm.
It's not actually anything special.
Okay, awesome.
That all sounds good. Well, especially if we're not going to do anything weird with it, we're just going to be like importing it and stuff. We'll just throw it in there. If it's usable, we'll use it. Seems like it's a slightly better version. Reddit one. All right. You can go on to this last one. So this is something that came up in the stand-up yesterday. Basically, just the naming of this label we want to introduce. So the idea of this pull request is that we want to split up the host training into two separate things, where a training the daemons off a host and draining the config and keyring we deploy on the hosts are slightly different things. So you can do one but not the other. And for doing that, we need to introduce a new label to mark the config and keyrings being drained. And so yesterday, it seemed like people were a bit confused with the naming and stuff. And since these are really hard to change after they're sort of in an actual release, we sort of wanted to talk about it a little bit here. So I have some just doc changes in the pull request here that sort of explains what the labels do. Well, this part specifically is talking about what drain will do. What drain will do is add bulk labels by default. No schedule, which stops it from putting daemons on that host and gets them all removed. And no conf keyring, which will stop it from putting any config and keyring files on the host and remove any that are there. And then down here, there's an extra part that explains what this label does. But it basically just sort of piggybacks off the no schedule label description up here, and then just says that this one applies to config and keyrings. And then there's also the naming of the flag, I guess. So the flag that gets it to not put this label on the host so that you can only drain the daemons but not the config keyring is this keep conf keyring flag. Yeah, we were basically just talking about how we want to name these things, make them a bit less confusing. More so for users, I guess, than us, even though it's nice for us to be able to easily understand it as well. It's most important that it makes sense to users how these things are named.
Do users normally handle these levels? I mean, these are like internal levels for Ceph ADM.
They can, if they want to, put these on manually, but typically these labels only get put on when people are draining the host. So they use the host drain command, and it puts before this change, it would just put this no schedule label on, and it would tell them what daemons are on those sets to be drained. And usually people are draining hosts when they want to remove them. So they would mark the host as being drained, which would put the label on. Then Ceph ADM would remove all of the daemons in the background. And then once that's done, they would just remove the host. So they would usually never touch this label themselves. That being said, they can if they want to. There's nothing stopping them from saying, I want to add the no schedule label host and remove the daemons or something.
I have a somewhat silly question. No conf keyring doesn't make sense on its own without no schedule, right? Like one is kind of upstream of the other.
You technically could put it on its own if you were like, if you wanted like a placement for config keyrings, and then like you're like, actually, I want this host to not have them for whatever reason. You could put that label on instead of it.
It wouldn't break anything.
No, it would be fine. It would just remove the config keyrings.
All right, great.
So it can exist on its own. Like most of the time, I expect them to be paired up together because you probably want to. You're usually draining hosts because you want to get rid of them or remove them from the cluster.
Sure. So this conf keyring pair is mainly used for other things that aren't managed by Ceph ADM to talk to the cluster? Yeah,
so you can basically, I have to go into like what the keyring management in general is, but if we can find the doc for that as well, just so we can look at it a little bit. But basically, it's like any keyring you want. Like, so for example, if you need some client keyring for some client daemon on the host for whatever reason,
right,
you could have Ceph ADM deploy that on every host that matches like X label, for example, or like every host that matches, or I don't know, any placement basically. You just put some placement for it.
Okay.
And so I guess you could use this one to say like I had it on all these hosts, but this one host right now I want to not get those config keyrings, and you could put the label on manually. But again, I expect it to mostly just be used as part of the drain.
Yeah.
See if I can find the conf.
Well, I would say the suggested name that you have right now is okay with me. It seems clear enough now.
Yeah, I couldn't come up with anything better for the market. That's why I left it that, because it gets into this roughly permanent. So once we do it, I'm gonna bring it up as a topic. Make sure. Yeah, this part talks about the keyrings and stuff and what it does. Basically, you can put pretty much any keyring there. and then it'll just deploy that keyring into the etc Ceph directory on all the hosts that match the placement. So again, if you in theory were like, I want for whatever reason like this host I don't want to have the keyrings anymore, you could put the label on, and it would take them off of that specific host while still putting it on the other ones that match the placement. You could use it that way. And these docs are here if you want to look at just that stuff in general. But for this discussion in particular, it was just what do you want to name the label that says don't put these on this host?
So by default, this label won't be there, and normally we'll just go and remove the configuration files and the keyring from the host, right?
If you mean before this change, no schedule would basically cover both of these cases. So these were both encompassed under the one no schedule label, and so no schedule would cause it to remove the daemons and the config and keyring. So this PowerPress is just splitting it up into two things. And the reason behind that all is because somebody wanted to be able to drain hosts from daemons but leave the keyrings. I forget what the use case exactly was. It was something related to OpenStack. They wanted to do that on some of their nodes. Don't remember exactly why.
And they want to do this like automatically, not having to copy the files manually, right?
Yeah, because they want to remove all the daemons from the host, and the easiest way by far to do that is to drain the daemons. They do the host drain, but the host drain would also remove the config and keyring. So then they were forced to like manually edit their placements to exclude that host or something, which is a pain. So this would allow them to keep those config keyrings that they want on the host while still getting rid of all the daemons.
Yeah. Isn't there a way like to pass some flag without using labels when removing the daemons? Or that's the
Well, the label is how we do it internally, because we need to know which hosts we need to drain whenever we're doing like.
Does drain do anything more than apply labels and then let the background stuff happen?
I think it's just apply labels. I have it down here.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it basically
cool.
just applies the labels, and then everything else is done via the normal.
Right. So it's really a convenience thing, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So this is the drain host function. I don't want to go super in depth into this stuff, but it's not very long. Oh no, it does some other stuff. It also will mark. So OSDs are special, so you have to mark those as be drained as well, and then it prints out a list of all the daemons on the host. So it does some extra little things. But as far as handling the non-OSD daemons, it's mostly just prints out a list of what daemons are on the host, and it says, I'm going to drain these, and it sets the label.
Okay, so if your host had no OSDs on it, say it was just like MDS and some other random things, it would just empty them completely.
Yeah. And even with OSDs, it'll try to start draining them, but obviously the OSD removal process is a bit more in depth than the other daemons.
Yeah.
So that one has to do some other stuff, but for non-OSDs, it'll put that label down, and then when it does the normal apply spec stuff, it will get to applying the spec for for whatever daemon type, and then it'll always exclude this host from the placement because this no schedule label, that's what it does. And then by doing that, it will mark that daemon as needing to be removed because it says a daemon shouldn't be there according to the placement. It does it that way. And then the client keyrings actually use the exact same placement system for putting those down. And so because they do that, the no schedule label also affected them, and so they would also get removed in the exact same fashion. Because I think literally what we do when we're calculating where to put those is what's these? We just make a placement here. Yeah, and then we just make it a mon spec. So we just basically fake that we're placing a mon daemon, but actually this is the placement we're going to use for the client keyring stuff. So it's exactly the same system. It's just that what this pull request is sort of doing is saying it's using a different list of things to figure out which hosts are draining and which ones are available and stuff. Because this is one big function that does all of the calculation for where the client keyrings need to go. Calc client files. So if we're in there, it is using the new label that we're introducing. And then everywhere else is going to just use no schedule, the actual putting daemons down. Yeah, I mean, I'm confident all this stuff at least works with this pull request. It's just a matter of, again, what do we want to call these things? Like no conf keyring. I mean, I could come up with anything better for a label to say like going to remove all the config and keyring and then keep conf keyring for the flag. I don't know if that comes confusing because they're so similar in name, and they're opposites. But basically, the point is that this flag means we will not put this label. Because we do not put that label, we will not remove the config and keyring.
Yeah, so basically the naming is to keep the default behavior as if it is right now. So if you don't put anything, it will remove the configuration. And if you want explicitly to keep the configuration, you have to pass the minus keep. So here,
yeah. If you don't pass any flag at all, the behavior will be the same because it'll put both labels, which is the same as just putting no schedule before this change. So without the flag, it's exactly the same behavior as you would get right now before this PR is merged. And with this flag, you only get the daemons removed because you wouldn't have this label put on the host.
Yeah. What happens when you don't have the flag? It means that you have to remove. Sorry, you have to keep the files, right?
If you don't put the flag, then we put both the labels, and then everything gets removed. If you do put the flag, it puts only this label and not this label, and then the config and keyrings will be left, but the daemons will still get removed.
Right, so there's a behavior change for the flag itself, but the behavior of the drain command stays the same by default.
Yeah, so it'll look a little different because it'll have an extra label in there, but what it actually does is identical to what it did before.
Not sure, like in the past, when you have no schedule and nothing, you will remove everything.
Yes.
And now, when you have no schedule and nothing, you will not remove the configuration file.
Yeah, you'll only remove the daemons.
Yeah, so the behavior is changed. So the behavior is changing.
Yeah, but by default, it puts both labels.
Yeah.
So you get that, and then if you put both labels, that's the same behavior as before. It'll drain everything.
Exactly. To keep the same behavior, you have to put two labels.
Yes, but it's not
like but most people. I think Adam's saying most people use the drain command, so there's the normal workflow isn't changing. Only people who would say use the label manually need to be aware of this behavior change.
I'm thinking about like some upgrade scenario when you have old hosts with these labels for whatever reason, and then you have new manager running this code, then the behavior is changing, right?
I guess so. It would now put the config and keyrings back on the host. I was sort of just considering that as very unlikely because I don't know why you just leave a host around with no schedule on it. Not remove it. There's no point. You can't have anything on it.
I think that's a good point to raise. I also think that the danger or downside of putting those files back is probably very minor.
Yeah, I mean, if we're really concerned about it, we could put a migration on the upgrade that's like we'll put the extra one in, but I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah. Like if the only secondary risk is what John commented, then I won't add like more code in migrations. Like in the worst case, you will end up with some host with only configuration files, but nothing running on it.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's super unlikely that someone's just upgrading their cluster with some random host marked no schedule.
Yeah.
And the host is useless at that point.
Yeah. What I think it could be good to add at some point in the documentation to say, be aware of manipulating these flags on your
Yes.
own. We don't
Yes.
support that.
Yeah.
Or at
Because
least
these
just
flags are
warn them there's a
external
behavior
to
change.
CFDM. Yeah, because these flags are internal to CFDM and the behavior can change at any moment. So please don't play with them yourself because they are internal.
Okay. We got at least add a warning for adding the labels. I think we still want to let people remove the label. That's how you mark a host as like, I don't want to drain anymore. Like if you change your mind, you want to put demons back in the host, you have to just remove the label.
I think an admonition saying something like, these labels they're meaningful to the system and they're not, how do I say it? They're subject to change over time. And so if you're playing around with them manually, because this is more upstream, like downstream, we can just say, don't do this. But upstream, you should just warn people like, hey, be aware that the exact semantics may change between versions.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it should be something very good to have in the documentation. So this way we warn people not playing with these labels because they are internal to CFDM.
All right. Now I could add a note because when we talk about it, also the other thing about this about removing the labels. So I had a note saying like, be careful about adding these labels and just leaving them around. Host you don't want to remove because of it could change. But also, if you want to cancel draining a host, you want to remove these labels. I don't think we don't have a host drain cancel command. So
Right.
if you want to get rid of it, you just remove this label.
Yeah, probably it's worth just go and edit this command and not letting the users playing with these internal labels. So this way we prevent them from having to manipulate our internal labels.
Okay. I mean, I could also add, like a host drain cancel command if I wanted to. That would just remove both of these labels if they're there.
Exactly. So these labels are internal to us, and it's only a CPDM just manipulates them to add to remove whatever, but users shouldn't touch these labels this way. Like we avoid kind of
Not to open a can of worms, but are these the only internal labels?
No, there are 4 of them now. They're all documented in here.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the whole thing open.
Oh wait,
no auto-tune memory. I can see it and underscore admin.
I think everyone knows the admin one.
My question is, are these meant to be applied directly by users, or are there also commands that manipulate them?
I think these ones, I don't think there's a command for either of these.
Right. I didn't think so either. So I would kind of go back to my earlier statement, which is just warn people that they're meaningful to the system and not to be willy-nilly, but I don't think we should tell people not to ever touch them because in some cases that's the only way to use them.
Yeah, you have a point.
Yeah.
All right. I'll add a warning in general for I guess I'll add in this section that like you'll be careful with these. And I think up here, I'll add something that says like if you want to stop the draining, whatever, you can remove these labels because you have to do manually as well.
Yeah, I think in general we should avoid like giving the user the possibility to touch any internal labels and provide commands for whatever they need. Because this way we reduce the risk of something going bad because they are manipulating internal labels.
Yeah, I mean, we could always go through and add commands for all the other ones as well. But I think that's I don't know. It'll take a few more pull requests and things So I think I'll start
Yeah,
for this one, adding some sort of
yeah,
warning about the labels, and
Yeah.
then we can move forward
yeah.
from there.
Just like to be consistent. This way, if the user knows that, please don't touch whatever label starts with underscore, then nobody will go and try to do anything with these labels. Just to have like consistency, like we don't touch them at all, or we can't have like a mix. Okay, you can touch this one, but not this one. That's could be very confusing to the user.
Right. And we definitely go in that direction. I don't know if you mind that. Having commands for, I don't know, something like admin label or no auto tune or something. We could do that. But I think I'll start with the warning here, and then we'll
Yeah,
that'll be some sort of follow-up work.
yeah. And actually, adding this new commands as commands, it shouldn't be like very big task,
It'll be
because
very trivial.
it just put the label.
Okay. That makes sense. Let's see, what do we want to do here? All right. Well, we're already a bit over time at this point. That's noon now. I'm going to stop sharing. I think we got enough out of that topic. I think we kind of know what we're going to do going forward. Yeah, does anyone have any last minute things you want to bring up here before we call it? No. All right, in that case, yeah, we're a little over time, so we'll end it here, and I'll see you guys all next week. Bye.
Right. Thank you. Bye.